Today was probably the best day we've ever had in the world of SEO and content marketing, I think ever. So we have this drop of documents from Michael King and Rand Fishkin, and it seems like it came from this fellow, Irfan Azimi, who also runs an SEO agency. uh, Everyone in the world of SEO has been jumping through the stuff that cares about it, that wants to know what's good, that wants to win arguments. We started 3 or 4 years ago. What I haven't seen so far is a good breakdown of how the beginner, the person who does content marketing or is a general marketing manager should be thinking about the stuff, or even just the time challenged SEO, which I absolutely am. But today I just cleared off my desk because this is just like this is the kind of stuff that you love to see. And today, probably more than ever, I think that this is so monumental. This to me is more compelling and interesting than the AI updates in search. This is definitely a bigger moment than that. It's probably the biggest change I think I've ever seen since I started doing this almost a decade ago. So with that said, I want to cover the full breakdown of these new ranking factors, and I really want to give you guys 16 actionable takeaways, how you should be thinking about this stuff. I think for most SEOs, it's going to be underwhelming, but I'll start off with the hot tips I have, and then I'll get into kind of the overview, backup, context, all that stuff for anyone that's kind of missing what's going on. And then I'll get into sort of my conclusions, some preliminary thoughts. A lot of ink's already been spilled on this. I'm sure this is going to be a topic of conversation for quite some time. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some lawsuits that come out of Google on this. I don't think there's been anything seen from Google's side on this information yet. There's a lot to dig into there. But with that said, I want to give the rest of you who are practitioners and not SEO nerds a good rundown of what you can do with this information, what we learned and confirmed today, and how we can really move forward with this information and get some usefulness out of it. So here's really how you should change your process and how you think about this stuff. All right, so the first thing that I would touch on from this doc is Google clearly does have multiple tiers of content. It thinks about sites as different tiers, right? It's a big club and you may not necessarily be in it, is the way that I would think about this, right? So we've always talked about this concept of domain authority. It's been denied. Domain authority is not a thing. Site authority is really the value that Google has in the system. Now, it may or may not be real, but I think it's almost unavoidable that there is some conceptual backing within the system that drives at a metric that's probably called site authority, that weaves into the system itself. It's why you see Forbes ranking for irrelevant content that has nothing to do with financial information or the list that they charge people for. Why Parasite SEO, putting links into Reddit and LinkedIn, works so well, etc., etc. Anyone who has struggled to perform on a site knows that domain reliability, this metric, is very much a real thing. And conceptually, the importance there is basically to understand that there's three sort of tiers, three classes of the Google world out there. You want to be functioning in that first tier where this stuff is happening. Now, the Moz metric, the SEMrush, the Ahrefs, all these domain authority things are made up. They don't really mean anything, but they are useful heuristics as ever. For SEOs out there, it's really not going to change anything, but the actionable tidbit here is that there very much is multiple, literally like a class system within Google as to like what is and isn't relevant. I'll get more into that in the full deep analysis. This is just supposed to be the quick takeaways, but it's important to understand that there's no straight meritocracy here. All right, there is no level playing field in the world of Google. It is a pyramid. You do want to be at the top. You will benefit and get the most out of being at the top, undoubtedly. One other aside that I would add in here, this again is a useful takeaway for anyone doing M&A SEO. So if you're looking at 5 domains to merge into one, if you're doing a bolt-on acquisition or roll or whatever it is, right? You should pick the top domain unequivocally, right? So the best, oldest domain, and we'll talk about how these concepts are now getting fleshed out here, but you should basically always redirect to the best domain you have. The second thing I would note that came out today that was really interesting is that the system seems to have this concept about the last 20 changes that occur for a URL. I wonder if some newsrooms make 4 updates a day and five days in a week, and that's like a normal newsroom cycle. I don't really know. That's random thinking, but basically there's 20 changes that Google will track backwards in time for a URL. And that then has a bunch of interesting implications. And I think from all the things that I encountered so far today, learning and digging into this stuff, probably the only thing that I hadn't ever thought of or considered before. And conceptually, it's a really interesting thing. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of outcomes from this and a lot of things that we'll consider and sort of change our thinking and approach with. But very, very interesting to note that Google keeps this backlog of 20 URL changes, sort of like what you would see in an archive.org or a GitHub repo going backwards in time. And so I think the takeaway here is if you want to change Google's opinion of a page, your page, you basically need to make the update and then get it indexed 20 times to fully cleanse it, clean it from the system. I know that sounds kind of weird, but the sort of short answer there is for those of you who are struggling with site quality updates and you're not seeing an immediate impact, it's most likely driven by this very curious factor that there's sort of a longitudinal view of a page that Google is maintaining over time. And as that stuff is getting updated, you can sort of slowly improve the score if you're improving the quality of it. But it is going to take multiple cycles. The other thing that's interesting from that is also links. So if you're getting a homepage link on a major news site, it's interesting because you're most likely going to be benefiting from that link for, number one, some time. So it's not just the indexing and the processing as I've sort of always considered it as, but it's also this sort of factor where the URL updates get equated and factored into the process over time, right? This also means that the system for which Google is gauging content and link recency is based upon these sort of 20 snapshots as it's going along. And so for anyone out there who's ever got yelled at by your boss for getting a link on the homepage, big news feature, and then it disappears the next day, it both doesn't really matter because it'll still get equated into the system over time. And it also does matter in the sense that it's only one of those snapshots. So a lot of this is probably coming out of Google's need to address how to deal with timely, accurate, newsworthy information and how all this stuff is calculated. But this 20 URL changes rule is just conceptually very, very fascinating, and I found that to be quite surprising. I think this is sort of a new concept that we're going to introduce into our workflows as SEOs and content marketers. The implications, I think, are still a little bit unclear, but a lot that can really be leveraged and garnered from this information, right? The third thing I would say is ensure that your internal design visual hierarchy is not just an HTML hierarchy. This was really fascinating, but Google still has some component within it that tracks the average size and formatting of terms, the bolded text within your content, right? So on a real basis, that means that you're gonna want, it seems like your external links to be bolded, underlined, highlighted in some way. That may be going too far, but I really do think this is what this amounts to. So basically, because Google is trying to eliminate spam, right? So this goes back to way back in the day, paperairplanes.com, whatever it was, like having millions of site anchor links that are white text on white backgrounds disappearing into it. That's what that was back in the day. I think, talking way before my time here, probably like, mid 2000s or something. But that kind of spam filtering still seems to be within the system. And I think the most important takeaway is for site owners, CMOs, people developing new domains, our general gripe as SEOs with H1, H2, H3 tags that are structurally in the documents is that they're used stylistically. So developers, in order to save time, rather than just saying this element is 20 pixels high, 30 pixels high versus the 16 pixels of your average P tag for font paragraphs, our complaint is that there's no structural hierarchy there. We want people to use a logical system that doesn't repeat multiple H1 or H2 tags unless they are truly offering some kind of semantic hierarchy, some sort of better understanding that Google can leverage. But what we're really seeing from this is that the actual size of the text probably does matter. That visual hierarchy actually impacts how Google is processing these pages. And I think that's very surprising for anyone who's out there. Most likely it's just driven by the fact that there's so much sloppy HTML, and I'm sure all devs are guilty of it. I am too. But there's probably so much sloppy HTML out there that there's really nothing Google can do about the system, right? This is sort of what they have to deal with in order to understand and work through hierarchy. Fourth thing I would say is technical SEO is still technically important, right? Real proud of myself for that one. So topical, this concept of topical authority is still alive and well. Anyone that saw Big Boost after 2015, 2016 sort of understands the impact of high quality content, creating these topical authority centric sites. And since Google is using embeddings to measure on topic relevance of a page, we can continue to use that for site performance, right? So even when we're outgunned, again, going to number one, which is that there is some kind of domain authority, the site authority metric that's actually out there, what I would say is we can basically still overpower it or at least maneuver around it with high quality content. Now, as an SEO professional, I spend a lot of time trying to help the Davids slay the Goliaths. It is definitely getting harder and harder, but it is quite interesting to see this. And I think on a macro scale, that means that there's still a lot that small business owners, that people out there who are just trying to build businesses can really do out here to get results, despite the fact that we're fighting an uphill battle often, right? Now, the other thing I would note is there's these metrics, additional sort of factors here: site focus score, site radius, site embeddings, which I covered, page embeddings, which I kind of covered there. All this stuff is used for rankings, right? So the site focus score and the site radius metrics gauge how closely a page aligns with the site's core topics. So obviously, Google wants to send people to relevant site pages. What that means for you, the CMO, the business owner, the marketer, is you need to create high quality topical associations that are logical. Now, obviously, this is one of those causation correlation things where if a user likes a page and Google likes a page, Google's basically trying to mask what a user would like. But these technical SEO factors really still matter. It's not just about crawls. It's not about fixing 404s. There is a lot happening under the hood that the best of us SEOs out there are actually able to bring to the fore, and we're able to squeeze a little bit of extra juice out of a system that can often be quite cruel for sites that aren't massive conglomerates. That's just the reality. Another thing I found quite interesting is that image quality matters, right? So as SEOs, I think we try to get as much juice as we can out of images. As a content marketer, I try to think about the quality, the click-through, the usefulness, the presentation, all that good stuff. And frankly, the real thing to note here is our overall focus has always sort of been filtered towards the user, but the technical SEO underpinnings of these things really still matter. It's still somewhere within the beast of the system, and we're still definitely going hard to make this stuff happen, right? To get value for businesses out there. Fifth thing I would say for a tip here is don't overload your site with video content. So there's references to sites that are over 50% video content. It's hard to know whether this is really at its core a reference to adult content or Google being anti-competitive to YouTube competitors out there. If there's one thing that I wonder if the DOJ will end up, or someone will end up suing them antitrust wise for, it's this line right here. I think this is maybe where regulators could make some hay. As a marketer, as a business owner, I think what this means, and this is, I think it's early to say this, but it's probably going to end up being our core takeaway here, is you do not want your site pages to have a crap ton of video testimonials, video banners. If on an HTML level your site page looks like a YouTube competitor, let's just say, then I would venture to guess that it will negatively impact your performance. Someone's going to go and test this. It's going to be an interesting test, but it is worth noting that you do not want to have too much video content on your site if you can avoid it. All right. The sixth thing that we found, and this is something that SEOs have been aware of for a long time, given, PBNs, spam sites, but host age is actually a value that gets attached here within the algorithm itself. And that to me is just wildly fascinating. So if there's one easiest hack that came out of today's leak, it's that business owners can probably extend their domain registrations and see positive ranking value out of that purely from just getting a longer registration date, which is something that I would have said probably didn't matter when I woke up this morning, right? But it's definitely on. Um, so yeah, I've always considered this more of a thing as fighting PBN spam, but this does seem like an easy win. Shell out the extra 50, $60, whatever it is, get your domain registered for 4 or 5 years. We don't know what the optimal is yet, but this is probably the thing to do. The other question test we would have is, does this remove the sandbox faster, right? If you have a new domain that is registered in the system and it has a longer registration, does that help you get out of the sandbox? I would venture to guess yes. And with that, I'll note the sandbox is real, right? So not just for cats and toddlers, right? The domain sandbox, something that Google has repeatedly denied, is actually a real thing. And what this means is that new domains are placed in essentially quarantine for like 6 months, a year, whatever it is, before they can actually start performing well. I think the biggest implication here is that for anyone that's starting a new domain, so if you're doing a domain migration, a rebrand, any kind of M&A, PE work, startup, whatever it is, rebrand, you actually, it seems like, should sort of, I would say, pre-season your new domain name, right? So you take your cast iron, you pre-season it, same thing with the domain name. This is going to be sort of in our SOP moving forward, or at least recommended. I think it's going to be hard with most businesses and clients, frankly, to get buy-in. But like, I think the optimal move is, if you know that you're moving domains A and B to domain C, I would basically launch domain C, add it to Search Console, build your foundational links, and then just drop 2,000 words of content and let that sit there for as long as you can before you go live, so that it's at least somewhat in the system of Google. And then when it goes live, you do your 301s, all the normal stuff you do. Now, this most likely comes from the sandbox. This comes most likely from news, right? So not super deep there. Check out News Dash, John Shahada. I'm sure he'll drop something on this. News SEO is not really my core focus, but the building blocks of the sandbox just comes from trying to suss out what is real news. And it's the same thing we were talking about with the concept of the 20-page refresh and the homepage links and all that stuff. So that's really where this comes from, but it definitely has broad effect. It also comes from just fighting PBN spam and all that stuff, right? So if you want to, the best time to start a blacklist network is 6 months ago or a year ago, whatever it is. That would be my new SEO joke. Now, looking at number 8 here, content marketing changes are pretty massive. This is also, I think, very, very interesting. So a few new rules of thumb here, and this is probably the most valuable thing for most of the people out here that are watching this, if anyone. So number 1, you basically want to keep the content as long as possible, unless it's novel. You want to front load the interesting part, the core value of the article, both because it's good UX, which we've always encouraged our clients to do, but also because Google's system, this Mustang system, will truncate the length of an article. And so what this probably seems like it means is, if you're a mid-tier or low-tier site, Google's probably only going to crawl the first 300 words of your article. So you want to get the relevant content in the first 300 words, right? The AI backlash, I guess we already lived through the AI update, but that AI update most definitely is going to go after sites that have the footprint of AI content. You have your crappy FAQ section at the very, very bottom with no context. You have a super long intro that no one wants to read. You have a super long definition that no one really cares about, and a bunch of circular copy. And then 500 words in, you actually have something interesting. I don't think this is a reflection of the HCU, but I do think that this is a real thing that's been around for quite some time, right? We like to always joke about like knowing your girth in the content world. So keep it as rich as possible for the reader. You want to be high value. Length is always helpful, especially when you're trying to rank for an evergreen, highly competitive term. But also, what we learned today and what we already kind of know is short content still works, especially if it is high quality. But again, as I mentioned in point one with the site authority, it is not a pure meritocracy. There is a hierarchical system and model that Google is using every day that's been building for decades. That is how they go forth and assess quality and value. But this is kind of good news, I think, right? So for all the content marketers out there, just to summarize, number one, length is always better, but keep the juicy content up front. Let's say first 300 words, say in a 2,000 or whatever it is, first couple hundred words, try to get the value directly to the reader. That will help your UX also, which is another thing that Google is trying to measure. But as a rule of thumb, you will definitely benefit from the higher quality content in the sense that you're getting users value right up front. And when you're publishing original content, feel free to do so. Not everything has to be a 3,000 word slugfest, but try to have something original and interesting to add into the topic of conversation. The way to think about this is Google has an established topic like how to deal with depression from strokes. If a new study comes out from Harvard, Science Direct goes and writes a 200 word write-up, that 200 word write-up is actually going to rank because it's something novel, it's in the system. In 6 months, when everyone's updated their giant 4,000 word SEO guides, then at that point, it's going to be in the system, and so it's no longer novel, and that 200-300 word piece is not going to rank as well. That's really how it's working on a day-to-day basis out here. All right, number 9. So despite claims of link building being dead, link building is still alive and well. It remains crucial. And I think what's actually compelling from these findings is that it's probably harder, or it's probably, if not harder than it's ever been, I think it's a lot harder than people think. I've always wondered why a customer hasn't come to me and been like, first principles, why pay you? I'm just going to build crap tons of links. Maybe people do and they don't talk to me, so those people already weed themselves out. But I've also always known that it's not just about the links. The links are the fuel on the fire. You still need to have a systemic approach to how you're doing this stuff. It's like you could throw gasoline in a kiln, but you need a kiln and a system for melting the steel. And sort of, that's how I've always thought about the SEO work that we do, right? So with that said, a few of the key takeaways here. Link velocity as a concept does matter. Source type as a metric does matter. Again, going back to this concept of tiers, Google cares about quality. And it's probably not just this site authority, domain authority metric that we often throw around as SEOs. We use that as a heuristic, and Google probably does too. But it's from the sense of Google is looking at multiple factors to assess the quality and relevancy of your links, number one. And I would say number two, this concept that SEOs always talk about in terms of having a healthy mixture of links, a natural looking link profile, is a very real thing. Now, when we go in and build this keyword rich anchor text, we do really still put our thumb on the scale. And I think that's what this data also betrays, that the high quality links are really rare and few between, and if you can get the high quality contextual anchor text, you will perform well. Now, some of the nuance that's built into this comes from negative SEO attacks. Google is trying to stop people from just spamming their competition and making people suffer. But the reality is that between the sort of 20 update stuff and this goal that we have of getting links from newer pages, it's really important to just understand that at a baseline level, the quality, the mixture, the velocity, the associations on the sense of entity mapping and embedding, all of these things have a significant impact on search. Google is trying to weed out spam, so velocity spikes are going to hurt you. Irrelevant anchor text is going to hurt you. There are PR implications there, but I'm going to save that for another video because I'm sure this one's already getting extremely long. All right, number 10, URL recency matters. So you want to try and maintain and build consistency across your structured data and page elements. What I mean by that is the overall topical arrangement of your site is not only driven by the embeddings, but it also comes down to this concept of recency, not just on the link stuff and the site authority that I just covered, right? All these concepts fold together, but the short answer is the publish date matters. So for anyone out there trying to squeeze some extra juice out of your content, one of the easiest things you can do is update the content that was ranking really well 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 3 years ago that isn't ranking well now, and you will probably see a boost. As a company, the most high performing companies out there, I believe, will be updating content every 3 to 6 months, if not more frequently. It all depends upon the niche. It all depends upon what looks natural. It all depends upon what you can do. But it seems very clear that SEOs, content marketers, digital marketers in general can squeeze a lot of juice out of updated and recent content. The 11th thing I would note is that demotions or penalties are a very real thing, and I would allege that they mostly benefit large domains and conglomerates. So into the meat and potatoes of this. So Google demotes or can demote explicit content. It can and will demote link manipulation, CTR manipulation, all this good stuff. It also is stating that, again, exact match domains don't work. And it's also sort of stating that it's always looking at these things of SERP dissatisfaction, whether or not you're trying to exploit the EMDs, the exact match domains, and whether or not there is some kind of anchor mismatch, right, between all your backlinks. So again, reinforcing everything I've said above, but I think what's really interesting about this is that there is some sort of manual concept. There is some sort of proverbial fireball thing that's swinging around Mario style that will nick you if you are getting flagged for some of the SEO spam techniques. And obviously Google has filters to spam the spam or to filter out the spam from the spam, which is to say this velocity spikes. Negative SEO attacks probably are a thing, right? But also it's worth noting that, you know, the unnaturalness can also benefit you in certain ways. Another interesting thing I would say with the link manipulation explicit content side of this equation is that there's probably a high likelihood that this is more so driven by sites getting hacked and hurt from the types of companies that go and take over websites. This is less common on the explicit content side of things, but significantly more common when it comes to online pharmacy drug searches, sites getting hijacked. I think that's where a lot of this stuff really comes from. Now, the big mystery here is that exact match domains certainly do still work. And I think it ultimately comes down to the fact that Google, us as humans, engineers, I just don't think we're properly grokking how Google is thinking about this stuff. But like exact match domains to a certain extent have to work, because if you want Google, you want Google. There isn't a lot of ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? And so whenever you're searching for something specific, you know, yes, there's a case where if I say Amazon, do I want the rainforest or do I want the e-commerce giant that doesn't let people take bathroom breaks, right? So there's a difference contextually there, but in general, EMDs have to work. I think it's just worth noting, right, that like the demotions conceptually are real. You do want to think about how you're working with SEOs, and very, very importantly here, you can hurt your site more than you can help it in many cases, I would say. So keep that in mind as you're working through these demotions, this penalty situation. This is a very real threat out there to a lot of sites. I've said it before, and I'll add it here again. A lot of SEO is like an iceberg. You can really hurt yourself more than you can help. So keep that in mind. Now, the 12th thing I would note is click data, CTR information is real, and interestingly, it's coming from Chrome. So for people that practice the dark arts of SEO, not just link building, the people that say this stuff does work, it very much does work. Google does have sophisticated ways to filter this stuff out. But what we learned today is that you can utilize Chrome data and these real-time ranking signals, the boost signals. This is the real deal stuff. There is this out there, and of course Google has had to deny it because it does have a very, very real impact. Let me know who's got the connect on AI browser agents. The future of marketing AI teams is not going to be just having 6 or 7 specifically trained LLMs. We're probably going to have sort of this drone combat situation going on where there's like 100 AI agents out there manipulating the SERPs, and if I have 100, my competitor needs 120, and that means I need 150. The arms race will go on that front. 13th thing I would say is you should ditch the domain disavow tool. This is something that's been around for a while. I would honestly suggest that you probably just never even use this at this point. I've seen more people misuse it and hurt their domains than anything else. And I think right now there's just too much gray area in here. We don't know if it's used in any way. Now, obviously, today's leak probably doesn't encompass Search Console data. The fact there isn't a lot of Search Console information mentioned also makes me think and believe that there really isn't a lot to be had. There's separate systems, but basically don't use the disavow tool. Wait until there's some better studies from SEOs on this. They're getting rid of it anyways. So I don't think this is like a thing where you should rush to get it on and used on your site. It's just probably not going to matter. 14th thing I would say is you should continue to optimize for quality raters. This is something that Google has repeatedly downplayed, but for any business owners, marketers out there, the quality rater guidelines are actually a rich source of information you can leverage to guide you in your performance optimizations. Now, these quality raters, going all the way back to point number 1 in terms of the tiers that exist within Google search, the quality raters themselves are probably only looking at a small upper crust of sites and a golden set of URLs within the system. But you, as the smaller incumbent, new competitor, whatever it is, you can definitely benefit from leveraging the quality rater guidelines. Cyrus Shepard got hired at one of the outsourcing companies that does this. They have a few excellent write-ups and posts on how to leverage this information. Now, 15th thing, and this is the last one, my favorite. Character length definitively does not matter in SEO work. Now, there is no system for that as far as we can see from today. The short answer is if you get these crappy SEO audits people throw around from automated systems, it drives me nuts having to answer this, but it's not going to kill your site if the title tag is 84 characters long, or if it's 63 but it should be 55. Now, there are important CTR implications of the title tag and meta description. That's why I still love squeezing juice out of that low-hanging fruit there. But in a general sense, there is no metric where Google is running through your site and saying, oh my gosh, 90% of your title tags are too long and your competitors are great 100% of the time, so they're going to outrank you. This is really a correlative metric. If you have optimized and high quality character lengths, you're probably already doing a lot of this SEO stuff. The matter has always been more about the actual CTR improvements, the UX improvements for users, than it's been about the actual length. But this is a wonderful thing to get at. Alrighty, now number 16, there's just a lot of new information and ways that we can think and talk about the systems that are within Google. I would think of it as sort of this multiplex organism. It seems like there's over 200 different parts that go into the system, and there's about 1,400 ranking factors, or so the SEOs say. This is the doc that supposedly has all this in it. Thank you, Mike King. I Pull Rank. Check him out. One of the greatest SEOs to do it, and obviously is still doing it. Also has an exceptional team. Now, for everyone that's not an SEO nerd, that doesn't care about the drama, you're good. You can basically pause, go on about your day. You got 15, 16 high quality hacks. Everything after this part of the video is going to get significantly more boring, way more lame. We're going off the scales here, and I'm going to go faster. I'm going to be a little bit more advanced. I'm going to throw out more ideas. I'm going to do all that stuff. It's obviously getting quite late, but again, this was kid in a candy shop. This is like the best SEO day. And I'll, of course, back up and get to context and dissect kind of what's out there, what's been happening so far. But yeah, for everyone else, for all my people that are deep in the patents and love the SEO world, feel free to go on. Everyone else, just go about your day. Hopefully those were some useful hacks. My name is Shaheen Adibi. I am an SEO. Been doing this for about 10 years. Currently Director of Customer Success at Webupon. And we help people go from the hundreds and thousands to the hundreds of thousands and millions in revenue and traffic. It's what we do every day. Focus on SaaS, professional services, e-com, all that good stuff. Basically, if we can make you ROI, we will. If we're not the person for it, we'll let you know. Alrighty, so getting back onto the SEO world here. So, all right, number 16. This stuff is really fascinating. So, this is all conjecture that we probably had going, and now we truly understand it, right? The reality is there's multiple systems, microsystems within the algorithm, which makes sense. They're probably located in different data centers across the world, and we're seeing something like over 200 different sort of components referenced. Mike King's outlining about 1,400 different ranking factors. There are no ranking factors. It's all math, but this is really what it is. This is the way to think about it. Now, what I found quite interesting is just all this new lingo that we got in the system, right? So site architecture includes SuperRoot, which is how the queries get distributed, Spanner, which is about scalability, and then all these other ranking indexing systems. Now, SuperRoot, I think this is the core of what we need to think about as SEOs, how we're going to hack this stuff. Spanner is probably the technical SEO, the crawling, the search console stuff that's always been very important. But the query distribution, this SuperRoot system, this is definitely the gold mine to dig. This is where we're going to get the most money as SEOs, and I think learn the most if we can dig into this system and conceptual information, right? Now, crawling is managed by a trawler. That's what they call it. Does the crawl rate stuff. Very fascinating. Indexing happens on a different level, a few different levels. So this goes back to the tier thing I was saying. So the core system is Alexandria. Seg Indexer is the tiered document system. And then Terra Google is the secondary indexing for long-term storage. So Alexandria, the library of Alexandria, I think this is the sort of the core opus of SEO knowledge. Seg Indexer, I think, is probably the silos that are coming off that for each of your specific topical mapping areas. So the core of the onion is Alexandria. Seg Indexer is the built around the outer edges of the onion, or the silos that are going around it. And then Terra Google, I think, is the whole earth, the whole system, all knowledge. And that's probably what's getting stored on the super cheap storage systems that are out there. Very, very fascinating stuff. And again, this explains partially why it can take so long for older sites to perform well. Rendering, this I also found quite interesting. So HTML rendering, WebKit headless. This is the JavaScript system. This is definitely something that should be studied further. For anyone doing SaaS, headless SEO, that kind of stuff, this is, I think, very, very important for that. Obviously, probably lives, I think, not in the core system, or maybe it's a corollary system to it, somewhere in between Alexandria and SegIndexer in terms of processing importance, but very interesting. I think I would say is we got the link extractor in here. Web mirror, so canonicalization, duplication. This is where you're going to see all your problems develop in Search Console. Link extractor, that's really where the juice happens with a lot of the link stuff that we learned today. Mustang, boom, primary system, Mustang Sally, California, 1960 something, fastback. I'm getting pretty exhausted right here, but point being that there's clearly a tiered system that's working. Mustang is the primary part of that. There's A-Scorer, which is then working with that. There's Nav Boost, which I think is the most compelling thing that we learned about today. It's the re-ranking based on user behavior. This is the thing to understand and know moving forward. This is both reflective of the outside world and what's happening with search users, but also indicative of how Google thinks the world is transforming, and absolutely is going to be the precursor to how they continue to hopefully improve their AI models. Freshness Twiddler. So again, re-ranking based on freshness. We covered that above. This whole concept of twiddlers is hilarious. When I was a kid, those were people you didn't let in your schools. But now we got this value metric they're running here. This is how they've named their internal stuff. We got Mustang, WebMirror, A-Scorer, SegIndexer, segmented indexer, right? There's all these random things they've put in the system. A lot of new lingo that's been added into the world of SEO out here for us who are sort of in this world of knowledge. All right, so serving wise, we got Google Web Server, SuperRoot, which coordinates processing and ranking. We got Snippet Brain, which generates the snippets. That part is probably either going to die or it's going to supersede the AI system. We have Glue, which pulls together results, and we have Cookbook, which generates signals. I think there's going to be a lot more written about this stuff, but I do want to cover these new terms, which we are all going to need to know very, very soon here. SuperRoot, I think, is also fascinating because to me that's indicative of the fact that Google is constantly having to merge in personalization with customization, and that is then causing, I think, a lot of the pain that's out there in terms of their system and trying to get this stuff updated, which is why you then have Snippet Brain, which is sort of working on top of the system but not in the system, and then you have Glue, which is sort of trying to bring this stuff all together, and you have Cookbook, which is an additional system where I would believe they test out new features to sort of generate new signals and impact and sort of mix this all up into the system. Now, what I think you get at the end of the day is all of these different systems within the function, all these different twiddlers that are modifying it. Is Google is a massive conglomerate. I don't think there is a single person internally that truly understands what is within the ranking algorithm, at least as far as that then gets applied into the real world. I've said this before and I'll say it again and I'll continue to say it. I don't think that Google engineers understand the algorithm as well as SEOs do. We think about it all the time. We hack it all the time. We're always looking for alpha and edge in the system here. And I think that at the end of the day, as I'm looking at these components and the system within them, it really is the case that Google is, I think, where they're struggling in this AI conversion, besides the fact that they got lazy on easy money, is that it's hard for any one person to truly comprehend the system from end to end. Looking at it from their end, I would probably feel like I understood what was happening, but also have a completely different conception than us as the practitioners on the outside of the system. But there is clearly a lot of juice, a lot of magic to be had here. So I think this is all quite important systemically here. All right. So that was the top 16. I have no idea how long that video was. I'm sure it was way too long, but that's just how I roll. Now I want to get back into like what the normal video really would be. So let's break it down here. All right. So for all the real SEOs out here, this update didn't include anything you didn't know. You know what? I think we're going to have to part 2 it because I'm kind of getting scared this is just going to crash. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to come back, take a deep breath. People out there would really be proud of me.